everybody. So I wanted to talk to people about the war in Ukraine and the peace talks, and to explain what they are, and also to relieve some misconceptions. So there are some claims right now that it's wrong that USA is meeting with Russia without even inviting Ukraine, and there's even some claims by various European leaders that they think that Europe should be involved. Now, I want to just dispel those things straight off the bat. So first of all, Europe are not involved in this war. Okay? Nor is USA, not directly. And whilst you could say, well, Europe has been sort of proxying it, the amount of support that Europe has given is a lot less than what USA is. They've lied and said that they're supporting it more. They're not. They're not. They're simply not. Nowhere near on the same scale. It's more like double for USA. But even if they were, that wouldn't invite them to the negotiating table. USA is not there as a party. They're there as a mediator. And there's no point having Europe as a mediator as well. You don't need two mediators. It would confuse things. Now, if of course we'd had a mediator and they decided, oh, Germany can be a mediator, that would be fair enough if both sides agreed to that and so forth. But they've tried all that. It hasn't really worked. And the other thing is, yes, you can have a mediation between just the two parties, just Russia and Ukraine, and they've tried that. They tried that early on. And what happened consistently was that Ukraine were about to agree and USA came in and said, no, you're not allowed to. And so because of doing that so many times, Russia don't trust Ukraine and they don't want to meet directly with them. And also equally, Ukraine have been told so many times that they're not to meet with Russia that they don't want to. So there's a requirement to have a mediator. And whilst they've tried different other options, and they could have had someone like Germany or whoever, and I think Germany would have been one of the better ones because they were one of the co-signatories of the Minsk Accords, along with Belgium. And obviously Germany's a lot more powerful than Belgium. But it would be on that stage. And also USA is in a much better position to be the mediator. Now, another mediator could have been China. That would have been another option. But I think that USA is the better mediator because of their position. I think China's probably the second best, and I'd probably even say India would be the third best because they've been neutral in this. So they're probably the three countries that I would most want to have as mediators. Would I want to have Europe as a group? Definitely not. Would I want to have two mediators? Absolutely not. I think that complicates things. You never have two mediators. So if you think of this like, let's say, a court case. Let's say that somebody was hit by a bus, or allegedly hit by a bus, and they're suing the bus company for $100,000, let's just say, for an example. Now, they're going to go to court, and if they win, they get $100,000. Now, the bus company will argue and say, hey, we did nothing wrong, you're getting nothing. And the person will say, all right, well, let's have a chat first. And before they go to court, like the court filings are made, but before they go to court, they have a mediator. And they have a mediation session. And what the mediator does is that they say, all right, what amount will you agree to? And the amount will generally be somewhere between $0 and $100,000. And it'll depend on this case and how strong it is and how strong each side thinks it is. And there might be some other factors too, such as embarrassment. So mediation may end up saying, all right, well, we'll agree to give you $20,000 now and you don't have to worry about a court case. So if they think, oh, they can't afford to do a court case, so, we'll give you $20,000 now. Nobody has to go to the court case. But then you might go the other way and you say, well, I want $80,000, and then your name isn't tarnished because this is going to show how negligent your drivers are and so forth. So, and they might even go above the $100,000. Now, when you do that, the mediator is not just sitting in a room with two sides on either side of them. I know they do that in TV, but that's not how it really works. How it really works is that you separate off. You're in two separate rooms. Mediator visits one room, has a chat to them, and they might be chatting to the person that was hit by the bus. Then they'll go into the other room and chat to the bus company. And then they'll come back and so forth. And they'll only meet in the same room when they're relatively close to an agreement. Now, it might well be that the agreement is there's no agreement, we're going to go to court. But if they're all going and they say, all right, we're going to shake hands on 70, 80,000, for example, they come to the room and they're going to chat, and one side saying, all right, I think it's 80,000, the other side said 70, they shake hands and agree to 75. So that's the purpose of the mediator. So you would never have, oh, I want to have a second mediator. Who's the second mediator going to be? Oh, my friend is going to mediate. They want to come in. You know, they were there, they were on the bus. No, you don't have that. That's not how mediation works. And I think the people from Europe insisting that they're involved don't understand how mediation works, because you need to have one mediator. They can't have a lot of different people putting pressure on the mediator. That doesn't work. The mediator needs to be independent, and they need to be removed from the pressure. So Europe is really trying to stuff up the whole mediation process by insisting that they're involved. Europe should get the hell away and shut up and leave and just see what happens. So Europe are being completely unreasonable. As for Ukraine, well, let's just be clear here. Ukraine are a part of this, and they will chat to the mediator separately. But what Ukraine's saying is, oh no, we can't have them talk privately. Now, I'm sorry, but that is how mediation works. You talk privately, and then you talk to the other side privately. It's not like, I mean, there'd be no point in doing it if you were involved in, and there'd be no private discussion, because you'd never get anything done, because you'd be going there and having the mediator go in there and go to the person that's been hit by the bus and say, hey mate, how much are you likely to go? And they say, well, look, I lied about the whole thing, but, you know, I still have a sore leg. If they say that, and the other side listens, they go, ha. No, you can't have that. And you also can't have going to the bus company side and letting the other guys listen, and they're going, bus company's going, oh, you know, the guy was drunk. Can't have that, you know. You can't have that, because it ruins the process. And it is a process, and it's an important process to follow. So you really cannot have Europe involved. And Ukraine, I'm sorry, you have to be doing your bit separately. So this is just the stage where USA are talking to Russia. It's not the whole end. It's not like they're never going to talk to Ukraine. No, they are. They're going to talk to Russia, find out what Russia wants, work out how much they can accommodate, because same as like if you're in this mediation, if you suddenly say, oh, I want $1 million and I want a mansion, and they're going to say, no, you can't ask for that much. So there's going to be a limit. They're going to try to work out what the realistic amount is, and what the realistic variables are, and what the realistic range is. And that's what the mediator does at this stage. Then they're going to go back and they're going to say, all right, it's this. So what is going to be Russia's realistic range? Well, Russia actually released a map of what they want for their territory. So that's actually part of it at the moment. So they're saying, all right, we have already annexed these territories. It is not negotiable for you to get them back. They've already been annexed. That's, as far as Russia's concerned, that's legal. Now, other countries are not recognising that as legal, but as far as Russia's concerned, that's legal, that's non-negotiable. But Russia are actually asking for more land than what they've annexed. And they're actually asking for about 3 or 4 times as much as what they've claimed. Plus, of course, they want all of Russia back that they had before. So they're not considering that they're in Ukraine, they're considering that Ukraine are in their territory at this stage. So they're flagging it, regarding it as Ukraine as the aggressor, and so forth. So that's one thing. Now you can see there's clearly a range. So the range is from the minimum being the lands that they've already annexed, and the maximum being the amount that they have asked for, which is 3 or 4 times that much. So in terms of territory, that's our range. Russia could conceivably accept a peace deal which just has the 5 annexed territories, and it's Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Kharkiv, plus Donetsk, Luhansk and Crimea, I believe that's right. So that's the minimum. They will not accept anything lower than that. In fact, they probably won't accept just that. They're going to want a bit more than that, because otherwise there's no benefit to them. But they've gone all the way forward and said, well, basically they want half of Ukraine, and they've said which half and which parts and which parts they don't want, because they're going to be the parts that they can more easily control. So the parts that are pro-Russia, or more pro-Russia, that have a lot of Russian speaking, a lot of ethnic Russians, and a lot of people that, generally speaking, don't approve of the way that Ukraine are doing things at the moment. So they're the areas, and they're in eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine. So that's what they want, and that's what they like. Now, it's not all about territory, and in fact, territory is only a fairly small amount. Other non-negotiables for them will be that they want Ukraine to pass laws that explicitly ban Nazism, at the very minimum, from their government. So they cannot have a Nazi party, because they do have Nazi parties right now. They're not in power, but they still run. And that's illegal all around the world except for Ukraine. They want Ukraine to publicly denounce Nazism, and they want to have the people from the Azov battalion who are self-proclaimed Nazis. So we don't have to dispute whether they're Nazis or not, because they say, hey, I'm a Nazi. They say that. They say that they're Nazis. So when they say they're Nazis, we don't have to dispute it. In fact, the whole part of being a Nazi is that they're usually pretty proud of it, and they don't dispute it. Now you might say, oh, well, you say you're a Nazi, but you're not really. Okay, but nobody ever lies about being a Nazi when they're a Nazi. They never say, oh, no, I'm not doing anything. Other people lie for them. But if you ask them themselves, they have the swastikas on their necks and all sorts of things like that. They're pretty obvious. So we shouldn't be disputing that. That shouldn't be a debate. Now I know some people like to say, oh, well, you know, Elon Musk did a salute. But he's never said he was a Nazi. So that's the difference. Actual Nazis would say they'd be Nazi and proud. He's not Nazi and proud. He's not Nazi. Now, who knows? You never know. You know, he might come out some other time and say that he is. But you don't have secret Nazis. There's no such thing. It's not how they work. It's a bit like with terrorism. Terrorists accept responsibility for terrorist acts. They don't just hide around and go, hoo, no, that was a secret. And people really misunderstood that with certain terrorist acts. Terrorists sometimes pretend to have done things they haven't, but they're never going to deny doing something. So they need to get rid of the Nazis. That's going to be non-negotiable. They also need for Ukraine to not be allowed into NATO. And that's something that USA can promise. So regardless of what Ukraine say, as long as USA say no, they're never allowed in NATO, you don't actually need Ukraine's say-so in that. And then you also need to get rid of all of the anti-Russian laws. So Ukraine have passed, well, for one thing, they banned any pro-Russia parties from being for going for power. And of course, historically, all of their leaders had been pro-Russian. So banning a group that represents the majority of the people and what most people want is a bad idea. So they need to have that. So they need to bring that back. Now they've actually also banned communism Communist Party in Ukraine. I don't think that Russia really care about that. I think they're okay with that being banned. So that they need to bring back Russian churches and just people being allowed to speak Russian, because that's currently not allowed, and so forth. And so you need to have this sort of more peaceful, more collaborative approach. And then they're going to want to have also, as a bare minimum non-negotiable, they're going to want to have those 8 biological weapons facilities that they say that Hunter Biden helps us set up in Ukraine. They want to have all them removed. Now, of course, Ukraine deny that they exist, but they're going to want all that. And then they're going to, so that's really the minimum. So Russia's going to say, all right, we want all this at a minimum. So USA has to accept all of that. They have to say, all right, well, we think that's reasonable. Now, the only thing out of that that's really negotiable is the amount of land. So they'll say, all right, well, we'll accept all these things. We're going to say to Ukraine, you have to accept this or there's no deal. But we're going to have this range of how much land. And that's the bit that's negotiable. The rest of it is not negotiable. Now, there might be some things like they might say, all right, well, Ukraine, you're going to have to decide about your political leadership. Does Zelensky resign? Does Zelensky go to move to USA? And I think that's going to be one option, that not just Zelensky but his whole family and supporter group are going to move to USA and be supported there. And there's going to be, Russia's going to have to accept that whoever Ukraine want to have leave the country for political asylum are going to be allowed to leave and go to USA. And I think that's going to be something that Russia would agree to. So Russia don't necessarily need to actually have their trials. They'll get enough as it is, but they need to have that as a sort of negotiation. So Ukraine will say, all right, we agree, but we're not going to have people die. And in fact, you know, Zelensky himself will be like, I don't want to die over this. You know, I don't want to have all my supporters, my wife, my children, my family all die to save my country. So that's going to be a part of that. And then what else is there going to be? Well, Russia will want to have things like they'll want all of the alleged war crimes to be stripped from them. Now, USA doesn't necessarily have that power, but they can have USA support them in that and say, all right, well, we don't think that this is a war crime, and then they'll want USA to say, all right, well, this is a war crime by Ukraine and all that sort of stuff. And plus, of course, they want the sanctions lifted. Now, USA is responsible for the sanctions, so USA will have will be able to say, all right, we're going to lift the sanctions, or we're going to talk to people and try to lift the sanctions. And it won't happen straight away, but there'll be a lot of sanctions lifted. So there is wriggle room, but a lot of this is not wriggle room. Now, when they go to Ukraine, and again, I said the idea of someone being hit by a bus. If you're someone being hit by a bus, you're not on an even scale, because you were hit by a bus. There's cameras, there's evidence. So you have the leverage because you were the one that was hit, as long as you were hit and you weren't lying about it, of course. So it's not, sometimes it's a 50-50 thing, but quite often one side has all the power. And in this case, Russia has all the power. Russia's the one that was hit by the bus. Ukraine were the bus drivers. Ukraine was the drunken bus driver or whoever. While Russia was the one that was hit by the bus, has all the evidence, and, effectively, because they got all the power, they got all the nukes, they got everything like that. So Russia's the one that can push the leverage. So when USA goes to Ukraine in the second part, they'll say, all right, well, these things you have to agree to. And now, you don't want Europe involved with this, because it won't work. But you'll have a private thing, Trump and Ukraine, USA and Ukraine, and they'll say, all right, these bits are non-negotiable. You have to do these things. And they'll go, no. And they'll say, well, if you don't, we will force you to do them. And this is why Trump is, and USA is in such a good negotiating position, and why they make such good mediators, because they can say, all right, if you don't do that, we will remove funding and you will just be destroyed in the old-fashioned way, and all these things are going to happen anyway. This way you get to save a bit of face, this way you get to survive, this way you get all this. And that's what was going to happen. So Ukraine will get to have half of their country. They'll get to have most of their people survive. They'll get to have a corridor where they can flee. They'll get to have something out of it. And that's the thing, that they might say, oh, well, why are we agreeing to anything? Well, you're agreeing to things because the alternative is worse. So the mediation is to look for the middle ground, to look for the ground which is fairest to both sides. Now, it might seem really harsh on them, but that's what they'll do, and they'll say, all right, this is the bit we can wriggle on. And that's what Trump will say to Zelensky. He'll say, this is the bit we can wriggle on. You might be able to get this much land. And he'll say, I think we can probably push that you get this land, but you're never going to get that, sorry. You're going to have this, you're never going to get this. And that'll be the negotiation. Now, Zelensky could very well say, no, get stuffed, and then try to convince the European Union to take his side, and he'll breach confidentiality and spill the beans about what happened. If that were to happen, well, Ukraine will just lose all their funding, and they'll lose in the old-fashioned way. So this is an opportunity to give them a chance to save face, and Ukraine could even walk out saying they'd won. And I think, because it's fine. It's fine. You can have wars where both sides declare victory. That often happens. It's not uncommon. And I think Zelensky would be happy with that, where he says, well, I've declared victory. He flees, he sets up a Ukrainian embassy in USA, and he says, well, this is Ukrainian exile. A bit like how Tibet has their own, they're recognised as a separate country, whilst officially they belong to China, and they have all their embassies and stuff and say, well, we're still a separate country, we just aren't officially and not legally, and that's what they'll have. So I think that's what would end up happening, something along those lines. That might sound harsh, how unfair that we've been supporting Ukraine for all this time, and then the support was sort of fake. It was pushing a particular objective which failed very early on, and the objective was, of course, for Russia to look bad in the eyes of China. That never worked. China has always held all the cards, and China's now in a position where they have a lot of leverage over Russia, and Russia could be forced to be annexed by China, and I think they would agree to that fairly soon if this keeps going on. So it's hurting Russia, but it's helping China, and overall that the combination is getting stronger. So, and they're getting friendlier and heading towards that merger, which would spell, well, the end of USA as a power, and things would change dramatically for the world. So the longer this war goes on, the worse it is for USA. The better it is for China, and it's really kind of better for Russia too. So, the war has to end. USA wants it to end more than anyone else. Anyway, that's it for me. Bye bye now.